Something very strange just happened inside the Pentagon, and it could reveal far more about Donald Trump's war strategy than the administration intended. Because while the country is watching missiles fly across the Middle East, a moment during testimony in Washington may have exposed a much bigger problem. Trump has already launched a major military strike against Iran, escalating tensions across the region. But what's shocking isn't just the war itself, it's the way Trump is talking about it. Instead of showing caution or seriousness, the president appears to be treating the entire situation like a political spectacle. In fact, during an event earlier today, Trump openly joked about expanding the conflict even further. Take a look at this moment.
Is proud Miami sports fan, Secretary of State. I'm telling you, he's going to go down as the best Secretary of State in the country's history. Marco Rubio. I don't want him to get too popular. It's true. I don't want him to get too popular. You know, when they get too popular, all of a sudden you see, where's Marco? He's not around anymore. I don't see him. He's doing some job, and your next one is going to be, we want to do that special Cuba. He's waiting, but he says, let's get this one finished first. We could do them all at the same time, but bad things happen. If you watch countries over the years, you do them all too fast, bad things happen. We're not going to let anything bad happen to this country.
So while American forces are actively engaged overseas, the president is casually joking about launching additional conflicts. And you might expect members of his own party to push back against that kind of rhetoric. But that's not what's happening. Instead, many Republican leaders are doing something completely different. They're trying to convince Americans that this situation shouldn't even be called a war. Even though bombs are falling and military strikes are underway, several officials suddenly seem very focused on redefining the language. Watch this.
Then we may have casualties. That often happens in war. We're doing very well on the war front.
We set the terms of this war from start to finish.
9,000 Americans have been able to leave the region since the start of this war.
Nobody should classify this as war. It is combat operations.
I wouldn't call this a war as much as I'd call it a conflict that should be very short and sweet.
I don't know if this is technically a war.
We have declared war. So if we haven't declared war, then I don't see that. The president hasn't asked us to declare war yet, but they have declared war on us.
Do you consider it a war? It's a significant military operation.
Strategic strikes are not war.
They have declared war on us. I don't believe in the semantics. We've talked about the language this morning. We're not at war right now. We're 4 days in to a very specific, clear mission, an operation.
So, according to several Republican lawmakers, bombing another country and launching military strikes somehow doesn't qualify as a war. Instead, they call it an operation or a conflict. But while politicians argue over definitions on television, something else has been unfolding behind the scenes. Because during a press conference about the conflict, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth did something that immediately caught attention. He publicly thanked someone who isn't a general, isn't part of the Pentagon leadership, and isn't even part of the military command structure, Stephen Miller. And the reason he thanked him raised a lot of eyebrows in Washington. Watch this moment.
Stephen Miller, thank you for your support and your leadership, for your clarity, understanding why this matters to each American citizen, and why the War Department is central to ensuring that it happens. It doesn't happen without President Trump, and it doesn't happen without your clarity and your leadership. I want to thank General Nordhaus as well for your support at every level. There's so many to thank. I see Corey Lewandowski here from the Department of Homeland Security. It doesn't happen without the Department of Homeland Security. Of course, Joseph Humeyer, the other part of the new bromance between him and General Donovan. Eric Garrissey, who from day one in my office, he was my first sergeant in Iraq. He's one of my senior advisors. Day one, he worked at Southcom for a long time, said, we need to be focused on the cartel threat. And he built a team to help put us in that direction, a lot of which manifests to this day. Patrick Weaver, Phil Hegseth, who I happen to know, and Ricky Berea, my chief, for doing a great job putting this together. Tony Salisbury, thank you. So many folks that every single day in Washington, I hope you know, are working hard to run as fast as you are. to stand alongside you in this mission. This is not a conference with flags so we can pat ourselves on the back. I can tell you that if I sold that to President Trump as the objective, he'd kick me out of his office. This is an operational conference to bring our countries more closely together to achieve a shared objective and do so aggressively.
Now that moment right there immediately caught people's attention in Washington, because the Secretary of Defense publicly thanking a political operative for leadership connected to a military conflict is not something you hear every day. Stephen Miller is not a general. He is not a military strategist. He is not an elected official. He is a political advisor. Yet somehow his influence is being acknowledged during discussions about war. And that raises an obvious question. How much political influence is actually shaping decisions inside the Pentagon right now? Because if you listen to the way Miller talks about the military, his vision is very different from the traditional role of the U.S. Armed Forces. According to him, the military under Trump has been unleashed. He argues that previous administrations weakened the military with political correctness, and that Trump has now removed those limits. In other words, the military is being framed less as a defensive institution and more as a powerful tool that should be aggressively used. And that messaging is important because rhetoric like that often signals how leaders intend to use power moving forward. But what happened next in Congress is where things became even more concerning. During a congressional hearing, lawmakers brought in a senior Pentagon official, Defense Undersecretary Elbridge Colby, to answer questions about the administration's defense strategy. Now, hearings like this are usually pretty routine. Lawmakers ask questions, officials provide explanations, and most of the time the answers are fairly predictable. But this time, the conversation went in a very different direction. Right away, one lawmaker asked what should have been an extremely simple question. Should American service members refuse unlawful orders from the president? Now, historically, the answer to that question has always been very clear. Yes, military members are obligated to refuse illegal orders. It's one of the core principles of military law. But when Colby was asked that question, something strange happened. Instead of answering directly, he began to hedge. He talked around the issue. He tried to redirect the conversation. He avoided giving a straightforward answer. And the lawmaker kept pressing again and again, asking the same thing. If an order is unlawful, should a service member refuse it? And again, the official would not say yes. Now that moment alone raised serious eyebrows, because refusing to clearly affirm that rule suggests a level of uncertainty that simply shouldn't exist. But believe it or not, that wasn't even the most shocking part of the hearing, because then lawmakers brought up a series of reports that surfaced last year. Reports that claimed the Trump administration had discussed creating a massive domestic military response force, not for overseas wars, but for protests inside the United States. According to those reports, the plan involved deploying more than 23,000 troops across all 50 states. The idea would be to create a rapid response force capable of responding to large demonstrations or civil unrest. Now, that alone would be extremely controversial, because the United States military is not supposed to function as a domestic policing force. In fact, there are long-standing laws designed to prevent exactly that. But when the Pentagon official was asked whether he helped plan this force, he didn't deny it. Instead, he said he would have to get back to Congress with an answer later. Now think about that for a moment. If the reports were completely false, denying them would have taken 2 seconds, but declining to answer leaves the possibility wide open. And then the conversation became even more unsettling. Lawmakers pointed to a statement Donald Trump made during a rally last year. In that speech, Trump suggested that American cities could be used as training grounds for the military and National Guard. Training grounds, American cities. So naturally, the lawmaker asked the Pentagon official what the president meant by that. And again, the response was revealing. Instead of challenging the idea, instead of clarifying that the military would never treat American communities that way, the official simply said he wouldn't speak for the president, and that the president's words speak for themselves. That statement sent shockwaves through the hearing room, because the president's words were not subtle. He had openly talked about using American cities in connection with military activity, and the Pentagon official refused to push back on that idea. But the most revealing comment came near the end of the hearing. When asked about the relationship between the Pentagon and the president, the official said something very direct. He said the department is in tight alignment with Donald Trump. Now, on the surface, that might sound normal. After all, the president is the commander-in-chief. But context matters. Because when that statement is combined with everything else discussed during the hearing, it takes on a very different meaning. We're talking about a president who has floated the idea of using troops during protests, a president who has talked about American cities as training grounds, and a Pentagon official saying the department is tightly aligned with that president. That combination is what has people concerned. Now, to be fair, none of this proves that such a plan is currently being implemented. There is no official announcement of a nationwide military deployment force for domestic unrest. But the hearing showed something important. When given multiple opportunities to deny the reports, the Pentagon did not do so. And sometimes silence can be just as revealing as confirmation, because if plans like this were being discussed internally, officials might be extremely cautious about what they say publicly, and that leaves the public with a lot of unanswered questions. Is this simply political rhetoric that will never turn into policy, or are early discussions already happening inside government agencies? For now, we simply don't know. But what we do know is that moments like this are why congressional oversight exists in the first place. Lawmakers ask difficult questions. Officials are forced to respond. And sometimes in the process, pieces of the bigger picture start to emerge, whether this was a simple misunderstanding, careful legal wording, or a glimpse of something much larger. That's a debate that is already starting across Washington. But now I want to hear from you. Do you think this was just one tense moment during a hearing, or did this testimony reveal something much bigger happening behind the scenes inside the Pentagon? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below.